We have finally reached the last part of the chapter, and in this part, we will be learning about nomenclature. We will learn how we are supposed to scientifically name the classifications that we have been reading about, talking about, and studying about. You may remember that these names there is a very peculiarity towards it, right? So, for example, chordata, vertebrata. These are not languages. These are not names that we usually give to something. There is a particular system over here. There is a particular jargon that is working over here. That jargon is owing to the scientific quality, okay, the scientific attribution towards that particular class or particular kingdom or particular phylum. So let's find out that first of all why we need a systematic naming. Okay, so it's been difficult for people who speak multiple languages. So for a particular word, there is different terminology in various languages. So if we, for example, if we have to talk about lion, then there are so many. Lion is in English, right? In Hindi we have shade. So we must be having other terminologies in different languages. Then how do we come to one consensus? How do we come to one naming of this lion, so that when I am naming lion, the other person is also able to understand what I'm talking about, even though I or that person, we don't share any other common language. So there has to be one naming, one scientific attribution towards a species. Okay, so we write and read in different languages, so it's difficult to talk about the same organism, right? So this problem was resolved by agreeing upon a scientific name for organisms in the same manner that we have chemical symbols and formulae. So for potassium, it is universally agreed upon that the symbol for potassium is K, or for the symbol of sodium is Na, all right, depending upon its Latin name. And for example, in elements such as aluminium, you have Al, the first two letters. Similarly, in biology also, to come to a consensus that this particular species has to be said or written in this in these words only. So there is a scientific language, scientific name. Okay, and this system of scientific naming or nomenclature, was firstly introduced by Carolus Linnaeus in the 18th century, that is in the 1700s. The scientific name of an organism is the result of the process of classification which puts it along with organisms it is most related to. So that is not say an isolation or a solitary isolation of that particular organism. That scientific naming is always in relation to the other similar organisms that particular organism is related to. Okay, so the scientific name of an organism is thus very unique, and that unique quality makes it very relevant for the identification for that organism anywhere in the world. But when we actually name the species, we do not list the whole group of hierarchy. Now, I said that there has to be a relation when we are naming an organism. There has to be a relation of that organism with other existing similar organisms. So we cannot put into account all the hierarchy of group that those organisms belong to. So we only take the last or the first two hierarchy. We only take the species name and the genus name of that particular organism. So this has been agreed universally that I mean all over the world, that only the genus and the species name would be taken, and both of them would be used in the Latin forms, so that it makes it scientifically easier for its assessment and scientifically easier for naming those organisms. Here's a brainstorming activity for you. Find out the names of the following animals and plants in as many languages as you can. So like I told you, tiger, neem, peacock, lotus and potato. All of these are the English names. There will be Hindi names as well. Tiger, we say bagh, neem, peacock is more, okay, and is cheetah. So likewise, there will be different terminologies of all these organisms in different languages, all right. So you can sort of do a fun activity, okay, by finding out all the different kind of names that you may of all these organisms. Okay, convention is that we are taking the genus name and the species name, and the normal consensus is that the genus name would always be written in a capital letter. For example, a genus name, say it starts with A, so the A would be written in a capital letter, and the species name, that would start with a small letter. So here just an example, if this is the genus name and if this is a species name, that genus name would start with a capital letter and the species name would start with a small letter. Okay, then when printed, the scientific name is printed in italics. Okay, but you cannot write in italics, right? It will be very difficult. So when you are writing, you always underline, like I have underlined over here, the genus name and the species name would always be underlined, but they would be underlined individually, or they would be underlined separately. They have to be underlined separately, not in one go. So not in one continuous line, but rather in two distinct lines that I have done over here. Genus name with a capital letter, species name with a small letter, and separate underlining when you are writing, and when you are printing, the names should be, both the names should be in italics. And finally, ending this chapter with another activity, there is a fun activity for you. You find the scientific names of any 5 common plants and animals. We had taken some other in the brainstorming slide, so you may refer those and you may find out the scientific names of those 5 common plants and animals. And since you have already figured out the names of those organisms in different languages, you may try to find out any similarity, if you may, or if there is any. Normally there is not any similarity in the names that we normally say, and that between the scientific name and between what we normally say, because the scientific name, like I told you, is in Latin and it differs from the layman language, but you may perform this as an activity and find it for yourself. We have come to the conclusion of this chapter. Let's take a cursory glance. Let's have a quick revision and study what we had to in this chapter, diversity in living organisms. So we know that classification is necessary and that helps us in exploring the diversity of various life forms. And the major characteristics considered for this classification that divides the living organisms into 5 major kingdoms: Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Those classifications, the basis of this classification are the nature of the cells, that means whether they are made up of prokaryotes or eukaryotic cells. Then the body organizations, means whether the cells are living singly or considered or organized into multicellular and thus complex organisms. Okay, so whether the body organization is working at a cellular level or at a tissue level. And the last is the mode of nutrition. All right, so whether they are producing food by themselves or whether depending on other organisms for their food. And the other also category that will be taken as a subcategory basis of classification, that will be taken as that whether the cells have a cell wall or not. All right, and the 5 kingdoms, like I told you, they are Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. And these 5 kingdoms, they are majorly classified on the basis of these 3 criteria that I have just listed out. Then the classification of life forms is related to their evolution. From simple organisms, we have the complex organisms. The complex organisms, they are evolved from the simple organism, and the first person to notify us about this evolution was Charles Darwin in 1859. Okay. Plantae and Animalia, these 2 important kingdoms that we have learned in considerate detail, they are further divided into subdivisions basis of increasing complexity of body organization. That means whether they are differentiated into few cells, cellular level, or whether they are differentiated into tissue, organ system level. Okay, so plants are divided into 5 groups. Halophyta, the most simplest ones, the body form is not differentiated. Bryophytes, body form is differentiated, but there is no vascular bundle. Pteridophytes, there is vascular bundle, body form is differentiated. In bryophytes also body form is differentiated, but there are no vascular bundles. But in pteridophytes, there are vascular bundles, but it doesn't produce seeds. Okay, and then later we have phanerograms, which is further divided into gymnosperms and angiosperms, depending upon whether the seeds they are appearing naked in the gymnosperms or whether they are appearing enclosed within the fruit, that is in the angiosperms. And lastly, we have the animal kingdom that is divided into 10 groups. We have the porifera, the simplest one, the cellular one. Then we have the tissue level organization. And firstly, in the tissue level organization, we had division based on the presence or absence of coelom, which is coming up from the mesoderm. So we have Coelenterata, we have Platyhelminthes, they are acoelomate, they do not have coelom. Nematoda, it is a pseudo, it has a pseudocoelom, means there is no true coelom presence, but rather a false coelom, presence of a false coelom. Annelida, Arthropoda, mollusca, you have a presence of a true coelom. Triploplastic, all the three layers. And finally, when the coelom is coming up from the endoderm but not from the mesoderm, we have the classification of organism based on the presence or absence of notochord. Okay, we have echinodermata, protochordata, and vertebrata. Okay, and you have three important things to remember over here in the chordata section. The presence of a notochord should be there, gills should be there, because in the complex organisms, those gills are transformed into lungs. Alright, so gill slits should be there, and the dorsal hollow nerve cord should be there. Then the nomenclature, the binomial nomenclature makes for a uniform way of identification for the vast diversity of life around us. We cannot recall, or we cannot name everything from all the common languages that we speak. So we have we have fixed a certain scientific language, certain scientific names, that jargon word. Okay, and these names, these are Latin names. Okay, and we have taken the genus name plus the species name, because we are not isolating that particular organism, but rather we are studying about that organism, and we are naming that organism in relation to other similar organisms. So we take the genus name, we take the species name. The genus name is always, the first letter is in capital, the first letter of the species name is in small. When written handwritten, they are underlined separately, and when they are printed in italics. So the binomial nomenclature is made up of the generic name, the genus name, as well as the species name. So this was all that you had to learn in this chapter. Diversity, it is a very lengthy chapter, but I hope you go through every detail closely. You learn about every concept in meticulous detail, and I have tried my best to explain you all the smaller details and to linger upon the harder parts. Make sure that you habituate yourself, you have a look at all the different names, so that once the concept is registered, by having a look at the names and again, the names would also be registered soon. So thank you so much. Take care and study well.